The Buffalo nickel of 1920 stands as one of the most fascinating chapters in American coin history because it was born at a moment when the United States was standing between two worlds, the fading frontier spirit of the 19th century and the fast-moving industrial power of the 20th century. By 1920, America had survived. World War I endured social change and stepped into a new era of automobiles, factories, and cities. Yet the soul of the nation still looked back toward the open plains, Native American heritage, and the powerful image of the American bison. The Buffalo nickel carried that memory in metal. The Buffalo nickel, officially known as the Indian head nickel, was first introduced in 1913, replacing the Liberty head design that had been used for decades. The new design was bold, emotional, and unlike anything Americans had seen on circulating coinage before. It was created by sculptor James Earle Fraser, who had grown up in the American West, surrounded by Native American culture and frontier life. Fraser believed American coins should reflect American identity rather than classical European imagery, and the Buffalo nickel became his masterpiece. By the time the 1920 Buffalo nickel was struck, the design was already 7 years old, but it had become deeply symbolic. The obverse side features a powerful portrait of a Native American chief, not a single individual, but a composite created from several real Native leaders. Fraser studied and admired these men, represented strength, dignity, and survival at a time when Native American communities were facing immense hardship, cultural suppression, and loss of land. The face on the 1920 Buffalo nickel is not romanticized, but realistic, showing age, character, and resilience. The reverse side of the coin shows a massive American bison standing firmly on the ground. The animal was modeled after Black Diamond, a famous bison that lived at the Central Park Zoo. The bison was chosen because it symbolized the wild heart of America, a creature that once roamed the plains in the millions but had nearly been hunted to extinction by the early 20th century. In 1920, the buffalo was already a symbol of loss and preservation, reminding Americans of what could disappear if not protected. The year 1920 itself was a turning point in American history. The nation was recovering from World War I, soldiers were returning home, industries were booming, and society was changing rapidly. Women were on the verge of gaining the right to vote, prohibition was beginning, and the Jazz Age was about to explode. Against this backdrop, the Buffalo nickel circulated quietly in pockets and purses, connecting everyday Americans to a deeper historical identity. The 1920 Buffalo nickel was struck at 3 different mints: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint produced coins with subtle differences that collectors study closely today. The Philadelphia mint did not include a mint mark, while Denver coins carried a small D and San Francisco coins carried an S. These small letters would later become crucial in determining rarity and value, especially as many Buffalo nickels wore down quickly due to their high relief design. One of the major challenges with the Buffalo nickel design was durability. The date and denomination were placed in raised areas that wore away easily. By 1920, millions of earlier Buffalo nickels had already lost their dates entirely, making them dateless coins. This problem affected the 1920 issue as well, although later in 1913, the design had been slightly modified to better protect the date. Even so, finding a 1920 Buffalo nickel with a clear, readable date today is far more difficult than many people realize. During 1920, the average American used the Buffalo nickel daily. It bought newspapers, streetcar rides, candy, and small household items. It passed through countless hands during a time when cash was king and every coin mattered. Few people imagined that these nickels would one day be studied, collected, and valued as historic artifacts. They were tools of survival, not treasures. Economically, the year 1920 marked a period of adjustment after wartime production. Factories shifted from military supplies to consumer goods. Inflation rose and fell. Wages fluctuated, and many families relied on small change like nickels to stretch their budgets. The buffalo nickel was part of this economic reality, symbolizing stability in a rapidly changing nation. Culturally, the Native American image on the coin carried complex meaning. While it honored indigenous strength, it also existed during an era when Native Americans were denied full citizenship and faced forced assimilation. It was not until 1924 that Native Americans were granted U.S. citizenship. The 1920 buffalo nickel therefore exists in a space of both tribute and contradiction, making it historically powerful and emotionally layered. From a numismatic perspective, the 1920 buffalo nickel is admired for its artistry and studied for its variations. Strike quality often varied, with many coins showing weak details, especially on the buffalo's horn and the Native American's hair. Collectors today look carefully at these areas to judge condition. Coins with strong strikes and minimal wear are significantly more valuable than average circulated examples. Over time, the buffalo nickel became more than currency. It became a symbol of American identity during the Great Depression. That followed a decade later. Many people saved coins, unknowingly preserving history. By the time the Buffalo Nickel series ended in 1938, replaced by the Jefferson nickel, Americans already felt nostalgic for the design. The 1920 Buffalo nickel survived through roaring 20s hardship, wartime, and modernization. It passed through the hands of factory workers, farmers, soldiers, shopkeepers, and children. Each coin carries invisible stories of the lives it touched. Every scratch and worn edge reflects a moment in American history. Today, when collectors hold a 1920 Buffalo nickel, they are not just holding 5 cents. They are holding a snapshot of America at a crossroads, a nation remembering its past while racing toward its future. The coin connects Native American heritage, frontier, mythology, conservation awareness, and early 20th century life in a way few coins ever have. The Buffalo nickel remains one of the most beloved U.S. coin designs ever created, and the 1920 issue stands proudly within that legacy. It represents endurance, art, and national identity struck into metal during one of the most transformative periods in American history. As the 1920 Buffalo nickel continued to circulate across America, it silently witnessed the transformation of everyday life. The early 1920s brought electricity into more homes, automobiles onto dusty roads, and motion pictures into crowded theaters. Yet, while technology raced forward, the imagery on the Buffalo nickel remained rooted in the land and its original people, creating a powerful contrast between modern progress and historical memory. In rural America, the 1920 Buffalo nickel often changed hands in farming communities where mechanization was slowly replacing traditional labor. Tractors began appearing in fields once worked by horses, and families who had relied on barter now depended more on cash transactions. The nickel represented reliability, a small but essential unit of exchange in an economy still tied closely to agriculture. In cities, the same coin passed through factories, diners, streetcars, and corner shops. Industrial workers earning daily wages relied heavily on small denomination coins. The Buffalo nickel clinked in lunch pails and coat pockets, paying for coffee, bread, newspapers, and entertainment. It became part of the rhythm of daily life, rarely noticed, yet always present. The artistry of the 1920 Buffalo nickel continued to influence how Americans viewed their own culture. Unlike earlier coins that borrowed heavily from European styles, this design was unapologetically American. The Native American portrait did not resemble a mythological figure, but a real human face with sharp cheekbones, deep eyes, and a solemn expression. That realism gave the coin emotional weight and set a new standard for American coin design. James Earle Fraser intended the buffalo on the reverse to appear grounded and powerful rather than decorative. The animal stands firmly on the earth, representing endurance and survival. This message resonated strongly in 1920 as Americans reflected on the cost of war and the fragility of progress. The buffalo was no longer abundant, but efforts to protect and preserve it had begun, making the image one of hope as well as warning. Minting technology in 1920 still struggled to fully capture Fraser's high-relief design. As a result, many 1920 buffalo nickels show uneven, striking especially around the date Liberty and the buffalo's details. This inconsistency has fascinated collectors for generations because no two coins seem exactly alike. Each one tells a slightly different story of pressure, metal flow, and human craftsmanship. Over time, certain mint issues from 1920 gained particular attention. Coins struck at the San Francisco Mint were often weaker due to worn dies and lower striking pressure. Denver coins sometimes show sharper details, but were produced. In smaller quantities, Philadelphia coins were more plentiful, but still suffered from wear issues. These differences transformed the 1920 Buffalo nickel into a puzzle that collectors continue to study carefully. As the 1920s progressed, the Buffalo nickel remained in circulation alongside major social changes. Jazz music challenged traditional norms, prohibition reshaped nightlife, and cultural expression exploded. Yet even as America danced into modernity, the coin's imagery reminded people of older values, strength, resilience, and respect for the land. For Native Americans, the coin carried mixed meaning. While it placed their image at the center of national currency, it did not reflect their lived reality. Many indigenous communities continued to face discrimination, poverty, and cultural suppression during this period. The 1920 Buffalo nickel therefore stands as both recognition and reminder of unresolved injustice, making it historically complex and deeply symbolic. During economic downturns later in the decade, families often saved coins, unknowingly preserving Buffalo nickels in drawers, jars, and boxes. These small acts of saving allowed many 1920 coins to survive into the present day. Though heavily worn, they remain authentic witnesses to history. When the Great Depression struck in 1929, Buffalo nickels, including those from 1920, were still circulating. Their worn surfaces reflected years of hardship use and survival. For many Americans, these coins were lifelines used for basic necessities at a time when every cent mattered. By the time the Buffalo nickel was officially replaced in 1938, the design had already earned legendary status. The Jefferson nickel introduced that year was cleaner and more practical, but many Americans missed the bold artistry of the Buffalo and Native American portrait. The end of the series marked the close of an era. Today, the 1920 Buffalo nickel is studied not just for its monetary value, but for what it represents. It is a bridge between frontier America and industrial power, between Native heritage and modern identity, between art and everyday life. Holding one is like holding time itself. Collectors examine wear patterns, strike quality, and surface texture to understand how each coin lived its life. Some 1920 Buffalo nickels may have crossed state lines, others passed through generations of families. Each journey is silent, yet meaningful. The legacy of the 1920 Buffalo nickel continues to influence modern coinage. Its spirit lives on in commemorative designs and collector enthusiasm, proving that a small piece of metal can carry enormous cultural weight.